As Kim said, I'm Tom Eitler. I'm with the Urban Land Institute. When I left Prince William County back in 2000 or 2001, can't remember, I went to work for a land use consultant. Several years later, I started working for the Urban Land Institute, and I've been there now for 12, 13 years, working in their advisory services department. If you don't know, the Urban Land Institute is a nonprofit 501c3 where our mission is to provide leadership in the responsible use of land and creating and thriving, supporting thriving communities worldwide. We have about 45,000 members. We're both an education and research organization, but we're also a membership organization. And years ago when we were created, it was primarily developers, you know, what you would consider a sort of standard run-of-the-mill developer, but these are folks who wanted to think about urban land in a different way. And since that time, we've gained 45,000 members. We conduct research. We provide a forum for sharing best practices. That's really what our primary purpose is. We do write books, and we do, you know, edit a magazine that we have called Urban Land. We do a lot of meetings. And then the thing that I do the most is advisory service panels. I run that program. 2 panels took place in Prince William County over the last 30 years. We had one for innovation out there in Manassas, and the other one was for the Route 1 corridor. And since that time, I think there's also been a couple of local technical assistance panels done by the local district council. I know someone might have their mute not on, but I'll let that go. And yeah, 2 things I wanted to say. First of all, I'm not representing the Urban Land Institute in this presentation. These are sort of my observations as a citizen of Prince William County and a former employee, and a person who cares about what happens in Northern Virginia, because I've always been into economic development and urban planning. The other thing is, I want to say that that a lot of what I'm going to recommend tonight, a lot of the things I'm going to say, you know, this is my observation as of May 28th. Things are, as you all know, and everybody's watching the news, you know, we just don't know where these things are going. That's kind of my first slide here. But I hope to talk to you about sort of observations about future land use, and especially demand in the wake of the pandemic. And it's fairly early to talk about demand. But you know, we are where we are, and if I come back, say in October or December next year, this coming year, it would be interesting to see how different my recommendations or suggestions are, or maybe observations are. I want to talk about office and retail entertainment and hospitality, and also about public spaces as well, and the impacts on metropolitan growth and what happens in DC, and especially in Prince William County. Like I say, we don't know where this is going. Right. I think if we knew this is tough for Americans. It's tough for people in a place like Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C., where we kind of always know where we want to be and what we want to do. And everybody right now is in a situation where there's just not a lot of answers. There's definitely more questions than answers. And even after this presentation's done and we answer some of the questions you might have and have a conversation about this, we still are going to probably not know as much as we would want to know. Social distancing, I never heard that term before 3 months ago. It's now, you know, sort of the standard out there. And I would say one of the things that everybody has been watching with sort of bated breath on the news is if a vaccine comes about and it's a successful vaccine, it's not partial, or it's, you know, not just certain people can take it, but if everybody has a vaccine, a lot of what we're talking about, a lot of the world of how the world operates will change and maybe get back to more normal, the normal world that we have. I think commuting patterns are going to change. I don't think there's any doubt that, you know, everybody working from home right now. My offices are in downtown DC. I took HOV every single day for the last 12 years down to downtown DC. And I think those commuting patterns are going to change. I think things like the Horner Road lot, where I go to catch, I can catch a ride to any place in Northern Virginia or DC or even suburban Maryland, you know, those are going to be rethought. You know, are we going to have the same commuting patterns? I went out there the other day at about 7 o'clock, and I used to go there and I used to struggle to get a parking place sometimes, you know, after about 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And now it's a wasteland. There's no, you know, there are people that are getting picked up, but And then I think there's a discussion to have, or a thought, food for thought about infrastructure investment, what we're spending our money on, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's mass transit, whether it's roadways, and all of the other things associated with that. And I put this one up. I told Kim I didn't at first want to do this. Now, you know what? I don't care. I'm putting it up anyway. It's, these global challenges. There's things like climate change aren't going to change. Whether we're at peak oil or peak oil's happened many years ago, or it might be coming up, who knows? There will be a worldwide recession. I don't think there's any question about that. Unemployment is going to be high. It may not be as long as we hope or think, but it hopefully that's the case. Our status around the world has changed dramatically. I think in some cases, this is one of those situations, among others that have happened over the last 20 years, that have questioned the leadership that the U.S. has in this regard. And I put that word end of empire down there. We said that at the end of 2000, and we said it at the end of the Iraq War. We say it now. Is this the end of the American what we do? I don't know. It's just it's a provocative slide for you guys to consider. What I want to talk about, and I use this in a lot of the presentations we have when we start talking about how to advise cities and counties on how to deal with land use and development issues. The pace of change, 50 million users, these technologies, this is how long it took for them to figure out how to get 50 million users. For television, when it came out, it took 22 years for there to be 50 million users. For iPods, it took 4 years. The famous one is Twitter. In 2 years, 50 million users. Now, this is kind of a joke, but did it take 3 weeks for everybody to get used to Zoom? The truth is Zoom's been around for a while, but the point is, in the last couple of weeks, I don't think anybody in the working world right now is not surviving without Zoom or a Zoom-like technology, whether it's Microsoft Teams or Skype or any of the other, FaceTime, the things that are out there. I'm on Zoom with the work that I'm doing, which is both national and global work. I'm on Zoom all day, and it's the way we get work done. So all I'm saying here is the ability to adapt to what might come up at and what might be the result of COVID is going to be addressed through a technology or through technologies. And I think that's a good thing. So just bear that in mind. And it's sort of, again, another provocative slide for people to consider. I put this up as my initial thoughts, having been all around the U.S. in hundreds of communities, advising them on how to deal with their land use issues as an initial thought. And again, this could change dramatically next week or 2 months from now or 2 years from now. I think that office space, there's going to be a big rethink on office space. Some people say, okay, it's office space, there's going to be less need for it. There may be more need for it for social distancing, who knows? But I think initially there's going to be a reduction in the desire of tenants to try to get more office space and to sign leases, and long-term leases particularly. I think retail, we all realize that that is one of the big issues here. It's the one that is, most resulting in the unemployment that we have right now. And I would strongly suggest you support your local community and, get out and, use the food services and the restaurants and do the takeout orders, because that's going to help, try to help them survive. Stadiums, arenas, theaters, you could go on with probably a list of 20 other types of land uses that are going to be affected by this. What's going to be positively affected by it? I don't know. One thing that came up, and we had ULI puts on, has been doing a lot of research and have done a lot of forums and webinars on this, and talking to users and owners and investors out there, that this could be the way that we could deal with a part of or a portion of the affordable housing issues that are facing most urban areas right now. There's not a large urban area in the country that doesn't have an affordable or workforce housing problem. So can some of that office space or some of that retail space be converted to housing? Is that right for the local jurisdiction? Do they want to do that? Is that going to mess up their plans for what their tax base is? I don't know, but it is an issue that people are considering. And bear this in mind, in downtown Dallas, a lot of the offices in downtown Dallas have already, even before COVID, they've turned over from being general office space to either hotels or residential, and it's been very successful. It's not been done without cost to the city, but it's been done in a manner that meets a desire that's out there. I think potential winners, suburban development, and I use that term suburban development not as a throwaway term. Half the country lives in a suburban area. I think people fail to realize that sometimes, that it's not everybody lives in a city. Not everybody lives in a very dense area. Half the country still lives in suburban development. And the question is, can we do that development right? Myself and the Conservation Alliance and a lot of people on this call here have been calling for more appropriate suburban development for a long time. And I think there's a potential here that there might be a bigger desire to get out there. And then ex-urban and rural housing, and I can talk a little bit about that later. This is let me go to this next slide. This is from central Indiana near the Indianapolis area, but it sort of is a proxy for across the country, these desires for where people want to move. And the one that has the big bars there are suburban neighborhoods with a mix of housing, a mix of shops, and a mix of businesses. Prior to COVID, and I think continuing even now and through this, next couple of years, we'll still see that be the place where people, if they're going to move to a suburban area, they want to be in a place where there's more density, where there's more activity, where there are more uses, where there's a mixture, both from a age and a racial and from a economic status perspective. I think that people want to be in places where there's a variety of people. That's certainly what the millennials want. It may not be what my generation, the baby boomers, have done in the past. Certainly the Z generation and beyond that are looking and feel comfortable around people that may not look like them. And so my observation and my suggestion here is that we need to be doing some research on this. And it would be very interesting if you went out and did a survey today anywhere in this country, but let's say Prince William County, and whether that holds true, that people want to be in a neighborhood in a suburban area that's a mix of housing and shops and businesses, or whether that's changed because of COVID, and then come back in December and come back 2 years from now and see what those numbers are. But prior to COVID, this is where people, if they are moving to a suburban area, a suburban county or a suburban style city, they want to be in a place that has mixed use, mixed income. And I think that lends itself to the idea that that means higher density. And is that going to change? I think that's a question that, again, sort of food for thought or something to chew on. Let me just give you a quick study about office. I want to talk office next, and I'm using the example of what I've been very familiar with. We were located in downtown in Georgetown. Our old office had 50,000 square feet. We had an outer ring of private offices. We had most of the space was taken up by high-walled cubicles. We had Wi-Fi, but it was slow. We had no network, nothing but network printing. We had no swing space. We had no metro access. We decided 4 years ago to move. We should, because we're the Urban Land Institute and we're suggesting all of these innovative ideas about development. We moved to new offices at 20th and L Street. And, there's 32,000 square feet there, but it's an open floor plan. And until very recently, no assigned seats. So a person like me who for, 25 years of the work world had his private office, that was a big change, but I actually enjoyed it. It took months to get used to, but once we were used to it, with no assigned seats except for our CEO and some of our accounting folks. And so the point was we could get much less, just as many employees or more employees into much less space than we had before. And all of those amenities, that highly amenitized piece of wireless printing and swing space and cafe space and telephone booths to do private phone calls, all of that is the way office was going up until now. And the question I would suggest and I would propose to everybody is that still going to be the future? And whether that's professional offices out in the suburbs or high-rise offices in downtown, is that formula and that calculus still the same?
Okay.
Could I ask everybody to mute their yeah, thank you. Hey, Michelle. Michelle, I think you're not on mute. Yeah.
Okay.
But now, oh, good. So I'm unmuted. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and I muted everybody, so hopefully.
Okay, there we go. Good for you. You know how to use this. Okay. So let me go next to, so office space. So there's no question, I think there's going to be more work at home, less demand for space in downtowns, in urban places like Arlington and Alexandria, and in the suburbs in Prince William. I think there's something that everybody needs to understand. Those that are not in the commercial real estate business have to understand the typhoon that is happening right now among owners and investors and tenants that are in these areas. They have to address these issues of base rent. You know, the landlord has debt that he has to pay. They're hoping the rents would pay for those. There needs to be strategies for lease modification. And all this is going on while we're worried about being in our houses and whether or not we're going to do things the same way we are. But there's a whole world of investment that kind of makes the world go round out there that people need to be aware of, that people are struggling with. Rent strikes are possible. You've heard this, you know, people are going to say, well, I don't have a job and therefore I'm not going to pay rent. Well, what do? Do you evict, you know, or do you try to work a deal out? So I think all of these bullets that I have on here are pointing out the issue of office space is going to be an interesting research and policy point of discussion over the next 6 months to a year about how you deal with these things. I think strategies for offering rent abatement and rent reduction, especially in the very urban areas, in the downtown Washingtons and Arlingtons and Ballstons and Fairfaxes and Alexandrias are going to be very important. What you don't want is a bunch of property owners and investors having lost their shirt because people won't pay rent. And I realize that sounds like here I am, the capitalist, talking about this, but it is important because it affects everything else that goes on within the investment community that's out there. But I do think they're working it out. ULI has been a leader in hearing from both the tenants and from the developers and the owners of these properties and the investors in these properties about how they're trying to work these issues out. So again, food for thought for the future in any location. But I think, you know, the final piece is up to the right there. I have conversion to residential. So that'll be in the mix as we come out of this COVID issue. And again, here's my observation, the response from the owners to these folks. And whether this is downtown Washington or downtown Woodbridge, you know, if somebody doesn't pay rent, you can do nothing, you can evict them, you can make a deal. Evicting them is not going to do anything. And when we get into retail and that issue comes up, that's going to be even a bigger issue. You can't push away the people that are filling in your space right now. You know, retail space is something I spend a lot of time on. I spent a lot of time on it when I was here in Prince William. I did it as a consultant, and I'm doing it now in my position at the Urban Land Institute. And for the last 25 or 30 years, and those of you that are on this call that work in the real estate business and are consultants understand that there's been this push for experiential retail for a long time. It's no longer about there's a place to go to get your product and that's all you do. The idea is to draw people in through the experience that you have. I think this is going to be, COVID is going to be very hard on large center-oriented malls, including places like Potomac Mills. And of course, restaurants and bars and taverns and pubs, until they can figure out how to deal with the social distancing or to deal with it if the vaccine comes out, it's going to be tough. Wineries, vineyards, breweries, especially businesses in sort of our rural areas, as I've been talking to the Conservation Alliance about for the last couple of years. These are the kind of businesses you want to encourage in rural areas because it brings in tourism dollars, but it also provides the use for that property that otherwise couldn't be used for anything except residential. And they're struggling, although I would say at least some of the breweries have pivoted pretty well, the smaller ones. I don't know and don't have any personal knowledge of what's happening with like Two Silos, but you can imagine the money that they've invested in their wedding center and in their stage area and in their convention and activity facilities where they were hoping to get groups to come in to deal with entertainment, and then in the meantime sell them beer and that kind of stuff. I feel for them because I know they've made that kind of an organization, that kind of a brewery has made a huge investment in the idea of visitation, and that's nowhere right now. You can't visit there. I think outside of Prince William County, this goes to much more national and international travel. Airport retail, it was always a loss leader in a lot of places, and even in places like National Airport or JFK or Heathrow or Schiphol Airport. Airport retail there was to get the brand up. It wasn't to sell the product, but I think that might be going by the wayside given the fact that the air travel has gone down so significantly. I also think outlet stores, I've been on the downturn for a long time, but there's still places. I mean, I go down to Bethany Beach and Fenwick Island, and there's always one day that we go out to the outlet stores, and whether those outlet stores can survive, who knows? It'll be interesting. An observation about Costco and Sam Club style facilities. You would think they'd be doing extremely well right now, but I have it on a couple of sources that are telling us that they are struggling significantly. You used to be, you'd go to Costco and pick up your grocery shopping cart, and you'd go through and you would go through the whole place, and it was kind of an experience to taste food and see what was out there and buy this shirt and buy those printer cartridges, whatever it was. I never went to Costco to the cash register and didn't have a full cart. Well, people are doing that now. People are going out there. They've got their list of 5 things they get. They go out, they get their stuff, they get in line, they get out to the car, and they wash off and they get out of there. And so Costco, which is a volume business, and Sam's Club and the other types of membership retail facilities, big box retail facilities, they are struggling in this regard, and there's going to be a rethink on them. Now, I think they're a kind of organization, Costco and Sam's can survive, but I think just that's something to bear in mind as we think about the kind of spaces that you would take in retail. And I put in casinos. I did this for another presentation. Casinos, I don't know what might happen with them, but they're going to struggle. And any jurisdiction relying on casino funds to fund anything other than, outside of tourism is going to be struggling over the next few years, really. On the other side of the equation, there are other stores that may be doing okay. Grocery stores, although grocery stores, it's still, all of this information is still very preliminary. It's hard to tell whether they're going to do well. Everybody needs groceries. Everybody goes out to the grocery store. I certainly do. And they're a volume business as well. And the question is it working to their advantage? Are they price gouging? I don't know. But the point is, I think there's a case to make that grocery stores could actually do okay here, or at least survive. Liquor stores, they're doing great, right? Even ABC stores that are Virginia run, there's a run on them. I don't know if you've heard, but Total Wine and similar large box liquor and alcohol sales, even though that's all delivery and pickup, they are doing a booming business right now. I happen to have my drink right here. So drugstores continue to do well. You can get everything you need in there. They're struggling to get people in and get out. And they're also, grocery stores and drugstores are places where a lot of the employees, they've seen a lot of increases in COVID cases that are people that are working there. Quick service food stores, the 7-Elevens and so forth, I think they will continue to do okay. They're not going to do well, but they're going to do better than, say, a similar business that relies on people to actually get out of their car and spend a lot of time inside a place. And then hardware and supply stores, and I only put this in because I've heard both sides of this story. One is they're doing terribly. The Lowe's and the Home Depots can't, and then other people are saying, well, there's so many people home working on home projects and refinishing furniture and putting up fencing and all that they're seeing a big spike in people going to the hardware stores and getting things to do that. So again, all of this is just to think about, food for thought, for consideration, nothing to do with a policy point at this pace. But this gets back to my issue about how urban planning in the world that I'm in has relied on the idea that you do experiential retail, and gathering spaces are an incredibly important part of what happens in new urban development. And this can be in cities or it can be in counties. I mean, wouldn't you love to have in Prince William County, like you have down at Stone Ridge or some of the other places we have, the two silos where people gather. And the idea is if you can get enough critical mass gathering there, that the businesses that are associated with it can benefit from that gathering. And you know, is that out the window? I don't know. You know, there are empty spaces everywhere. I think the one in the lower left-hand corner is funny. That's a tourist village in Wales, and there's the goats walking through there, and nobody's out on the streets. But it is a different world. And is this the future of dining? You know, there's China, but there's also fine dining in Amsterdam in the upper right-hand corner. You know, I don't know whether that's a viable or sustainable approach, but people are, as you can imagine, are literally struggling to get out to have some kind of an experience outside of their house. And that seems to be working at this point. Although that picture was taken, I think, and you probably have seen that across the newspapers, that was almost a month ago. So I don't know whether there are other places that are starting to do the same thing. And I don't know what that means with regard to the contagion itself and whether that's spread because of this. And I just bring this slide up because we use this quite often about why you want to have an approach to urban planning and a policy at a local level that encourages a certain type of development. Urban vibrancy is what brings in people, and what brings in people brings in business, and that's economic development. And if all of that walkable, connected, diverse, resilient, and especially authentic, if that's all out the window because of COVID, then we've got a real problem. Hotels and hospitality are other ones that are struggling right now. The resort hotels are being hit the hardest. I mean, there's just no people going there. Although the upper in the right-hand corner or the right-hand column, tourism, it's interesting. There's, especially in places like San Francisco and New York and Chicago, local residents are actually moving into these spaces because there's not enough room to do the work they need to do. And the saving grace, as I understand it from a friend of ours in ULI, that it actually owns a hotel, the Intercontinental out in San Francisco. The healthcare workers are filling the gap right now. They're cutting deals with hospitals and with healthcare facilities to have the nurses and the doctors have a place to stay. You know, whether that's sustainable or not, I don't know. But it's, again, something to think about as you think about where these are. I don't know what's happening with the hotels and the motels in Prince William County, especially the ones that relied on people going to, say, Potomac Mills Mall, and whether they would do the shopping. I suspect that they're not doing that well. The tourism multiplier effect is something that everybody ought to be aware of. And whether you're just a citizen and interested in what's happening in Prince William County, or whether you're in business and you're worried about the economy in general, you know, the tourism multiplier effect is a big, important issue. And so for everybody that goes out and flies, I travel to, in a regular year, I'll travel to 30 or 40 cities around the US and a dozen cities around the world. And when I go, I have to get a hotel, I have to get a flight, I have to rent a car, I have to eat food. And all of that leads to additional issues and additional money that's being generated for the local economy. So again, I put that up there just for everybody to be aware that that's being interrupted with this COVID-19. So the food for thought for local planning and how it affects Prince William. Let me repeat again my second item here. I am not suggesting any rash decisions by local elected or selected officials here because of COVID-19 right now. We're 3 months into this. We don't know where it's going to go. What I am suggesting is there's some studying that can be done. There's some consideration that can be done. And it will set you up as you update your comprehensive plan and as you update your strategic plans to think more about how this has affected the world of land use. But, you know, does the land use plan make sense? Does the amount of office and employment that you have designated in the county the right mix? I say that because ever since, and when I first started working here, it's been, and this is the truth for almost every community around the country, everybody's trying to improve their commercial tax base, right? They want to get the balance between residential and commercial to the right place. And I think Prince William County has the desire to go to 35% commercial tax base, and the rest of that being residential. We're at, I think, 14 or 15 now in Prince William County, and they want to move towards 35%. I think the best ones in the country now are 25 or 30%. I think Fairfax has like a 30% commercial tax base, but that's an economic development goal that people want to have. And the question is, does that make sense given what's happening with employment and how much is going to go home? Should local jurisdictions reconsider that commercial and residential balance? When I was here 20 years ago, a house that wasn't worth at least $480,000 wasn't paying its way with regard to the services provided. I'm sure that's gone up dramatically since then, but the point was housing only at a certain value pays for itself. At least that's been the formula that we've understood for a while. And the question is, do they need to reconsider that balance? Is infrastructure going to change? Do we need as many roads? Do we need as much mass transit? I don't know. Park design is certainly going to have to change, at least if you're going to refer to it with regard to how people would want to interact with one another. I, again, am stressing it, and I'm not suggesting you go in and change around your park plans, but what I'm saying by this is I think you need more parks. I don't know if anybody's been out to Shenandoah or to the George Washington National Forest. I was out at Bear Wallow Trail, which I go to all the time, and it looked like the Klondike with people, trying to climb up the mountain. There must have been 40, 50 people. And when I've gone out there before, you'd be lucky to run into someone on that mountain. And it's just full of people now. So people are looking for things to do. Same thing for sports facilities. For those elected and selected officials on this call, I know you're already looking at this. I know that the county executive and the planning department and the finance department are looking at this, but if there was any of the bonds that were dependent upon revenue coming in, all over the country, places have gone through the process of, selling bonds based on a revenue source that might be coming in, and that's changing. Tax increment financing doesn't really happen in Virginia. You have taxing districts, but TIF districts, tax increment financing, all over the country runs the show, right? There are very few places in Illinois, New York, California, Florida, Texas that don't use tax increment financing as a way to get municipal funds to build infrastructure, to build economic development. And right now, a lot of that tax increment financing through the assessment is going to be in jeopardy. And the projections for the revenues that were going to be generated from that are going to be in jeopardy. These are the kind of things that I think decision makers need to think about as things go on. I think Prince William County is in pretty good shape. They have a AAA bond rating. I think that they've been very conservative about how they've spent their money and how they've done bond issues. And we have much more advantage than a lot of other places around the country. But it is worth thinking about that as you put that on your list of things to consider in the update of the comprehensive plan and so forth. Another one is urban resilience, and we've been pounding on that issue for a number of years, and even prior to that, the idea of sustainability. But those aren't going away. Natural disasters, man-made disasters, certainly pandemics, as we've found out, and climate change, that kind of stuff isn't going away. This is not the time to back off of the issues of urban resilience. And the same thing with energy efficiency and net zero development. The smart ones, I think, are going to figure out what kind of demand is going to be out there, and they're going to use net zero development as another enhancement to get people and get tenants to come into their spaces. And so you don't want to back off of that. Same thing with protection of natural areas and historic resources. Nobody should be using COVID-19 as a justification for not protecting your natural areas. And again, a lot of what I just already said, which, understanding of revenue shortfalls that may impact. And I also want to suggest that the public and the general citizenry understand these are very difficult times for the development community. I represent an organization that has as its primary membership the development community. There may be people that say, well, as poor developers, boo-hoo, but the truth is they make the world go round because they're the ones that are getting the investment to come in here. And they're going to be struggling over the next 6 months, a year, 2 years, who knows how, 5 years, it could be a long time. So bear that in mind as you make considerations for this. And then I don't know if there's, I meant to say short term, relief for retailers. I think the best thing anybody can do right now as a citizen in this county is to support as best you can your local retailers, especially the restaurants. If you want the restaurants to stay, you got to support them. And I'm trying to go out 2-3 times a week, and that's just easy for me to say, but it's true. It makes sense to try to support them. So in any event, let me keep going. There's one organization that we deal with out in Indiana, Thomas J. Miller and Associates. They're trying to put together a program for identifying through data collection, viable, vital, but vulnerable businesses, and put together a strategy for dealing with them. And again, I will leave this with Kim so you guys can look at it. But the whole idea is there's a lot of things that local consultants and that local governments can do to help businesses. But one of the things they need to do is to collect the data about them and then see what the technical assistance they can provide, see what state and local economic development professionals can provide, and then see if there's a cluster of these vulnerable businesses that can be helped. There's a lot of steps to getting to this, but the most important piece is the collection of the data. Collection of that data probably doesn't need to take place in May of this year, but it does need to start this summer, and to see where these pieces start so that you have a strategy to deal with those vulnerable businesses over time. You can't have a healthy community without healthy retail. That's just an opinion that you would hear from, everybody from the Wall Street bankers down to the local merchant. You got to have healthy retail to have a healthy community, and you don't want to have them pushed away and just have sort of a monoculture of residential only. You got to deal with it. In any event, let me keep going here. DC region has, I think, a lot of positives, but I think there's going to be a huge shift in office space. I think that has mainly to do with work from home and telecommuting, as well as reduced office space needs. I think retail space is a big unknown. I hope that the restaurant community comes back both in Prince William and Northern Virginia, as well as DC. But where and when, I don't know. And the hospitality industry, I just heard today on a Kojo Nambi show that there's an 89% drop in the last 2 months, understandably, but a 90% drop in visitation to Washington, D.C. I don't know if that's a true number, but that's what the guy said who was being interviewed, who works for the local tourism board for the D.C. government. That's huge. I mean, that multiplier effect that I mentioned is a huge piece there. What we do have in our favor is we have Amazon coming, and there's been no indication at this point, unless I've heard differently in the last week and a half, there's no indication Amazon is stopping what they're going to do up in Arlington. We do have the federal government, which over time is, sometimes good and sometimes bad, depending on how it happens. But what you have is a resource that's there, and you have the needs that are there. We have the high-tech industry, and we have the most educated metropolitan area on the East Coast. I think there are educational institutions, George Mason, University of Maryland, Virginia Tech, University of Virginia, Maryland. All of these places have American University, Johns Hopkins, different places in downtown that make a big difference, and they are more resilient, I think, over time than a lot of other types of organizations. And then the institutional uses that are out there, some of them connected with the government and some of them not. So, Washington, D.C. Is a lot better off than a lot of other places in the country that are relying on one industry or several industries that may be more vulnerable to this than we are. I wanted to leave you guys with this because this is a website. This is Urban Land's COVID, addressing the impacts of COVID roundup. And this is just an example of the articles that have been written, but they're great reads, and I guess everybody has a little time on their hands, so these are good reads, but some of them are really important. For instance, how Main Street owners are working with tenants to deal with this issue, renewing the focus on resilience and future in cities, doing it now while you've got time to deal with it. So I'm going to suggest, and I'm going to leave this with Kim, and she can post it on our website, but I'm going to suggest you check out this. This is probably a third of the articles that have been written and the research projects that have been done and the webinars that have been done by the Urban Land Institute on this COVID since the beginning of this crisis. So I'm going to end in just a minute, but I did want to say I did spend 2 weeks in Wuhan back in 2016, and we drove by the Virology Institute. We also went to that wet market. I didn't know. We were looking at it from the perspective of how could they build a new suburb, a new town outside of Wuhan. Wuhan's 10 million, 12 million people, and it's bigger than New York. And there's a dozen cities in China that are bigger than New York you've never heard of: Foshan, Guangzhou, all these different places. And this is just a massive city, and our group was there to provide them with advice about how to build a new how to build a new city, a new part of the city in a way that was more appropriate. And what we came up with is that diagram in the middle, which said you need to be more intimate, right? You need to have not as large blocks. You need to have intersections closer together. You need to have a little bit of uniformity. They had these massive super blocks with gigantic towers on them and huge factories. And we said, look at Paris and look at Barcelona and think about how to be more intimate. That's how you would get the people to want to move to this neighborhood. And that's how you would make it a more successful neighborhood, because it would be an experiential retail and residential undertaking. Wow, were we wrong? I mean, how do you tell people move closer together in a place like China? And I'm not sure we were wrong. I say that kind of jokingly. It's like, who would have expected the Urban Land Institute to tell people in the city where this thing started, you got to get closer to one another? But we did tell them that. And at the time it made sense. I still think it makes sense. I think in a different way, we don't, it's sort of like what I was saying earlier, is we really don't know so much about this thing that we can make strategic decisions now. What we can make is do the strategic research and understand about it. So I would close with this, and I'm sorry I've gone on so long here, but I think you need to do research by the professionals that are out there. I think that you need support of the citizens and an understanding from the citizens about where this is going in the business world and what it means to them locally and also regionally. And then I think you need consideration by the elected officials that these things are all going to come to bear over the next year, and there needs to be some help. And I hope that I can provide it. I hope that the citizens that are on this call can provide it. But I also hope that the elected officials and the selected officials will consider these kinds of things, and a resource like the Urban Land Institute if you need us to do that. We're a nonprofit. We're here to help. And with that, Kim, I'm going to go ahead and conclude my presentation.